We want this to remain a peaceful event. Please stop throwing animal feed over the fence. seeing a lot of projectiles and active aggression from the crowd. If this behavior does not stop, we will be forced to declare an unlawful assembly. We are seeing a lot of projectiles and active aggression from the crowd. If this behavior does not stop, we will be forced to declare an unlawful assembly. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area now. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area now or you will be subject to use of force and arrest. You need to leave the area from Southwest Lincoln to Burnside, Waterfront to 13th. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area now or you will be subject to use of force and arrest. You need to leave the area from Southwest Lincoln to Burnside, Waterfront to 13th. the south now, or you'll be subject to use of force and arrest. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now, or you'll be subject to use of force and arrest. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now, or you'll be subject to use of force and arrest. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now, or you'll be subject to use of force and arrest. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now, or you'll be subject to use of force and arrest.
This is KGW News at 11.
Streets in cities across the country saw large crowds again today as protests continue following the death of George Floyd. Floyd died while in police custody in Minneapolis nearly 2 weeks ago. Ever since, protesters making their voices heard, calling for justice and change.
Earlier tonight, thousands marched to Irving Park in Northeast Portland, peacefully protesting for hours.
And tonight, groups made their way back to the Justice Center, where we've seen these protests turn destructive for the last several nights. A fence separates the protesters from police, the building, and those who are inside. Now, Portland police say that some zip ties on that fence have been cut, and we have seen some projectiles thrown at officers within the last half an hour here. Officers now declaring it an unlawful assembly and civil disturbance. Thanks so much for staying up with us. I'm Brittany Folgers.
And I'm Kristen Severance. We have team coverage tonight. Let's get straight to Morgan Romero downtown. Morgan, what are you seeing now?
Kristen, Brittany, as you just said, Portland police declared the gathering here an unlawful assembly and civil disturbance. As I step out of the way, you can see into Chapman Square here. It's hard to know just how many people. We haven't walked up and down this whole area. We're trying to stay as far back as we can for safety purposes, but at least thousands. And again, for one of several nights in a row, peaceful demonstrations followed by more rambunctious crowds. Projectiles are being thrown over the fence at law enforcement, the same as they were last night. Portland police recently tweeting slingshots are launching projectiles and additional projectiles are being thrown. Members of the crowd are attempting to use bolt cutters to cut through the fence. They're messaging to stop this behavior, again saying that if people continue this, they could be subject to arrest and use of force. I talked to a man, Randy Blazak, who's a criminology and sociology professor who was in this area last night. He studies this very thing that we're watching unfolding in our country right now. He and his wife came down here late last night to watch what was going on for themselves. He recorded everything on his phone and he tried to stay as far back as possible to observe. And then he was tear gassed.
A little bit after 11, some tension erupted between some of the frontline protesters and the police, and it appeared that there were some water bottles being thrown over the fence.
From behind that fence, this video from Portland police shows several bottles and objects, like this brick.
Here you can see this brick is almost as long as my foot and about an inch thick.
Thrown at law enforcement Friday night.
So here we have a metal pipe fitting.
And Multnomah County Sheriff's Office documented the aftermath.
These are all things that were last night thrown at our Portland police officers and deputy sheriffs.
As Randy Blazak recounts, police announced the protests had turned into an unlawful assembly and ordered people to leave or force may be used.
And then the flashbangs started and people began leaving. In the middle of this are these tear gas canisters are being shot into the crowd, at least near us.
Documenting it all, Randy says people split off to different areas and then many returned to the Justice Center around midnight. Police again ordered people to leave.
And then here we are a couple blocks away, but there's no people at all, and we're just here. And I'm wanting to record the police kind of right over my head. A tear gas canister lands behind me, and I start breathing the tear gas. And it just sort of comes on you in a wave, and then all of a sudden I was on my hands and knees coughing.
Officers used smoke and flashbangs to try to control the rioters.
Leave the area to the south, or you'll be subject to use of force.
A man who was at Terry Shrunk Plaza took this video of protesters clashing with law enforcement.
Hey, come on, buddy. No, bro, come on.
The sheriff's office, who was working alongside Portland police, says their goal was to protect the Justice Center and the people inside. Tear gas is a last resort, but MCSO says they used it after protesters kept throwing objects and tried tearing the fence down around the building. As an expert on policing, Blazak says tear gas works to get rid of a crowd, but it also works against law enforcement in the long term.
When you use a noxious agent like that, you anger people. You bring people into the fight. People who see it as an injustice are now going to be showing up at these rallies thinking, you know, all cops are the bad guys.
Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler released a statement earlier today after a lawsuit was filed about the use of tear gas during protests to control crowds. He said he told the Portland police chief that it should not be used unless there's a, quote, serious and immediate threat to life safety, and there is no other viable alternative for dispersal. He said city leaders know this is an urgent issue, and they're going to work together in the coming days to come up with an action plan because they know the community is demanding action. I do want to mention back out here live, as police have said that this is an unlawful assembly and civil disturbance, I have seen many groups on this side of Chapman Square leaving or at least going further back into downtown. Back to you guys.
All right, Morgan, thank you so much for that live report. You know, Portland police are giving us an interesting view from behind the fence there at the Justice Center. We want to show you this. So PPB is live streaming from a GoPro or some sort of camera, and you can see perspective from the officers there. So as they're looking at the crowd on the other side of the fence there at the Justice Center. And you heard Morgan say, you know, according to police, they're saying that projectiles are being thrown from the crowd, you know, over the fence there towards officers. If you want to watch this live, you can see it. It's live right there. The officer, someone is obviously adjusting the camera, so you know it's not a perfect shot there. But if you want to watch it, you can go to the Portland Police Bureau Twitter feed right now, and they are streaming it.
And as we heard Morgan mention there, you know, it depends on where you're standing, seeing these crowds move. So let's get a different viewpoint from our KGW Art Edwards, who's also in downtown right now, where these protests are continuing. Art, tell us a little bit about where you are and what you're seeing.
Right, we're down on 3rd Street, just a little bit north of the Justice Center. We're between Salmon and Taylor. So what we could see behind me is about a block and a half away is the crowd where they have gathered the fence. You could see them. They have been rocking that fence, trying to work on it. It looks like they're trying to knock it down. We've seen things being thrown at the federal building, at the Justice Center in that direction by people, and we can hear the announcement that says this is an unlawful assembly, and they're telling people that they have to leave. They want them to move south of this location. They want them to move in the direction south, away from those two buildings. So, you know, this isn't the only thing that has been going on tonight. We were over in Southeast Portland earlier when a large group of people gathered at Revolution Hall in Southeast Portland. A little bit after 7 o'clock, they started a 2.5-mile march to Irving Park in Northeast Portland. Along the way, the marchers waved signs and they chanted. Once they made it to Irving Park, they took over the main field there. People listened to music and also to some speakers there. The organizers say that they want to wake up everybody in every neighborhood in the Portland and surrounding area. We talked with marchers about why it was so important for them to be a part of this.
And it just got to stop, bro. Like, I'm tired. Like, I don't want my son to have to go through this, you know, and I don't want to have to go through this or have my uncle or somebody that I know have to go through this, you know. So that's why I'm out here.
It was interesting talking to that guy because he's from Haiti, and he said he had no idea of what it was really like here in the United States. Now, back out here outside, not far away from the Justice Center, we are about a block and a half away from where all the activity is going on, from the Justice Center, where they've erected the fence and a wall to keep people away. Again, they've announced it's an unlawful assembly. They want people to leave. They're telling them to leave. They say if they don't, they could be subject to legal action. And we also see that people are throwing things at that building as well. So they're out here. They're not moving. And we're going to have to wait and see how this all plays out again tonight. Brittany and Kristen.
All right, thanks so much, Art. We'll check back with you a little bit later. Appreciate that. A big crowd also turned out today in Salem. The Salem Reporter is calling it the largest gathering seen so far there. The Statesman Journal estimates nearly 2,000 people participated in the event at the Capitol, which featured hours of protests, speeches, and a march.
In Vancouver, demonstrators took to the streets in a different way, inside their cars. The Vancouver NAACP came up with the idea so people could show support for the cause and keep up social distancing. About 1,500 cars drove from the town center plaza on Mill Plain to the Port of Vancouver Terminal 1.
I am very happy to see that Clark County showed up for the right reasons. This is about equity, this is about justice, and this is also about peace.
Volunteers used an FM transmitter to broadcast speeches from the rally so people attending could hear through speakers in their own cars.
And still to come, COVID-19 cases in Oregon are on the rise, and today there was a special opportunity to provide tests for communities most at risk.
Because we know that COVID is impacting Black and brown communities different than any other community, we
declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now, or you'll be subject. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now, or you'll be subject to use of force and arrest. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now, or you'll be subject to use of force and arrest. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now, or you'll be subject to use of force and arrest. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now, or you'll be subject to use of force and arrest. subject to use of force and arrest. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now or you will be subject to use of force and arrest.
Do you see the smoke up there?
Look from Sky 8 tonight as protesters gather outside the Justice Center. Portland police are calling it an unlawful assembly. You know, Brittany, I just checked the Portland police Twitter feed, and 5 minutes ago they said it's been 20 minutes since we declared this unlawful assembly and civil disturbance and told the crowd to disperse. They said the large majority has remained and is throwing projectiles at officers, including balloons filled with paint. And, you know, viewers at home, this is a streaming from a camera that Portland police has offered tonight from behind the fence.
That's right. So really one of the first times that we've seen that viewpoint of from police behind that fence. That fence was put up in place during these protests. It's separating the protesters from not only these officers, but the Justice Center itself, which of course has people working inside, has people housed inside right now. So there is that distance there. And we're going to take another look at Sky 8 just so you can see the magnitude of this crowd that's here. Like Kristen mentioned, about 25 minutes ago is when it was declared an unlawful assembly, a civil disturbance. Crowd majoritively has yet to move, and when we were on the ground there, we could see our reporters on the scene saying that they saw people sort of pushing up against that fence and large crowds. We do want to remind people too that protests started out on the east side earlier today and remained peaceful throughout the day. This is the Justice Center, where we have seen those protests start to turn destructive night after night around this time continuously. So we'll check back in with those live images, what's happening with the protests in downtown in just a moment. First, we want to switch gears here and talk about your forecast. So let's bring in Chris McGinnis. We saw plenty of wet weather out there again today, Chris, and not too much sunshine. in with Morgan Romero, who is live outside the Justice Center for us tonight. Morgan, this has been declared an unlawful assembly. What are you seeing? It looks like most people remaining in place outside there in downtown.
Brittany, yeah, we're at Southwest 4th Avenue and Madison. On this part of the protest, there's not a whole lot of people, and the people that we have seen come through this area have been those that have chosen to kind of step back and away from the Justice Center and the fence or have left. Again, it's been 30 minutes since Portland police declared this an unlawful assembly and civil disturbance. They told people to go home, to head south and go home. If they don't, they could be subject to use of force or arrest. I'm going to step out of the way as photographer Chad DeHart zooms in on the crowd. Now, we should mention this is a much smaller crowd than what we saw last night here. But around this time last night is when we saw things, getting a little bit more violent, a little bit more destructive. We saw Portland police using tear gas last night. Heard a lot more flashbangs at this time. Earlier in the newscast, I did a story about a guy who was tear gassed while down here last night, and he was a little bit further back, hanging back, and the tear gas spread kind of throughout the crowd, and we aren't seeing that here yet. But again, as it has been for several nights, not a few times this week, but many other times, it has been declared an unlawful assembly, and if people don't leave, Portland police are telling them that they could be arrested. We don't want to really guesstimate on how many people are down here. Hundreds, I would say. We haven't had the opportunity to walk up and down Chapman Square or Terry Shrunk Plaza, but a smaller crowd, much smaller crowd than what we saw here last night, and we'll continue to monitor the situation. We've seen a lot of people walking by us with goggles on, ski goggles and swim goggles as well, trying to protect their faces and their eyes should tear gas be deployed tonight by Multnomah County Sheriff's Office or Portland Police. And they declared this an unlawful assembly and civil disturbance because people, as they were last night, were throwing projectiles over the fence at law enforcement. We do have a live stream up on our website, and we've shown that a few times throughout the newscast from behind that fence, from Portland Police, showing water bottles, gas, as Kristen mentioned earlier, balloons with paint in them being thrown at police officers. Last night, we saw bricks being thrown, batteries being slingshotted, so we don't know exactly, we don't have the vantage point that my colleague Art Edwards does at seeing kind of closer to the fence at what is being thrown, but we'll continue to monitor that situation, and we will bring you all the latest on air and online. For now, I'll send it back to you guys.
All right, Morgan, thank you. We'll check back in with you in a little bit. And you can see Morgan is staying away from the crowds, for her safety. We also want to tell you about
This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now or you will be subject to use of force and arrest. This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area to the south now or you'll be subject to use of force and arrest.
And welcome back. We want to take another look from Sky 8 tonight as protesters gather for a 9th night of large demonstrations. You can see hundreds of people. They're crowded behind a fence there, and they're right in front of the Justice Center. And police are beyond that fence, and you can see, Sky 8, the camera is panning back, and you can get a better look at the crowd. Now, police have tweeted that they did declare this an unlawful assembly about 20 minutes ago and a civil disturbance. They have told the crowd to disperse. They say that the large majority has remained. They also say that people are throwing projectiles at officers, including balloons filled with paint.
And let's go live now to KGW's Art Edwards, who is on the ground in downtown for us. Art, how have things been changing as the night goes on since police declared this an unlawful assembly?
Well, they really haven't changed at all since they declared it an unlawful assembly, and that's part of the problem that police probably have with this right now. You know, they told people they needed to leave, they wanted them to move south, but we're not seeing a whole lot of evidence that people are actually leaving this area. What you can see behind us, we're on 3rd Street between Taylor and Salmon. That's Salmon, the direction where you're looking. You can probably see that people are shaking the fence that's been put up around the Justice Center. They've been doing that for a while, off and on. At about 10 minutes to 11, it was declared an unlawful assembly, and police told people that they needed to leave. You might be able to see now that they're throwing things at the Justice Center. People were told that they had to leave. They were told to move south away from the parks to get out of this area. But at this point, that has not happened. The majority of the people seem to be staying in place. We've seen a few folks who have moved north towards us in the direction that we are, but we're only talking a handful of people, not the vast majority who are out here. So they have been doing this and going at this for a while, and police continue to make the announcement. Seems like sometimes when they ramp up, when the protesters ramp up, shaking on the fence and throwing things, that police once again make that announcement that it's an unlawful assembly, that people are subject to the use of force. Okay, we hear the first of the flashbangs and what looks like probably tear gas. So they're probably, they've decided that now is the time to go ahead and do this as we get to just after 11:30. So you can see that people are going to start moving around. We're about a block and a half away, and I can see the crowd kind of moving around, maybe moving back a little bit, and trying to figure out what they're going to do next. So we can see things being thrown, and we can hear hear what sound like the flashbangs. That was the largest of them that we've heard so far, and more people are beginning to move away north, the direction we are, although police have asked people to move south away from that area in front of the Justice Center. You can also see somebody trying to climb up over the fence right now as well.
And that's what Portland police just tweeting out much of the same that they've seen since this group began, saying we're advising the crowd this is a civil disturbance and unlawful assembly. Please leave southbound, as Art mentioned, trying to move the crowd southbound. And Art, it looked like that fence was being shaken pretty hard, and we saw a few projectiles being thrown over right before that flashbang, or what looks like tear gas, was dispersed. Kind of tell us it looks like a little bit hectic out there.
Yeah, if you could see where we are right here on the ground, like I said, we're on 3rd between Taylor and Salmon. Police are now moving forward. They just dropped them off a couple of vehicles, and they're moving forward. They're moving southbound forward towards the crowd that's there, and people are beginning to scramble along Salmon. Someone from the group of officers walking north just fired a couple of projectiles into the air, probably tear gas, to begin to disperse this crowd. And we're going to start moving back, I think, out of this area a little bit, because we can see just a cloud of smoke that's in one of the parks that's right across the street. So we're going to start moving back away.
All right,
from this right now.
Art, why don't you get to somewhere safe? We'll stay on you here, but I'm wondering if we can look back if police are still streaming their viewpoint. We were seeing that earlier tonight. This again is Sky 8 video that we're seeing overhead. It does look like police are moving people southbound now, coming out and pushing that crowd out after that fence was being shaken back and forth. We saw more projectiles being thrown at officers. That fence, as we mentioned, separating the Justice Center and police from protesters. And now, Kristen, we're seeing a lot more activity since police have kind of taken that next step.
Right. This seems to mirror what's happened over this past week, where, thousands of people gather, it's peaceful for hours, and then several hundred people, make their way towards the Justice Center, and then there seems to be, almost a standoff with police. Today, what was different, it seemed like the area was much more lit. It seemed like, the lights you could really see around the Justice Center. And something else that was new, Portland police had a streaming camera. They were streaming behind the fence, and you can see it right there. It looks like, perspective, it looks like a body camera, but we believe it's more like a GoPro or some other, small camera. And that is behind the fence. So that is what, some officers are seeing.
And I just want to say we're just getting more reports in from Portland police. This is from their Twitter, saying officers are getting fireworks and smoke bombs thrown at them from the crowd. Lasers are being pointed at officers' eyes. So that's just the latest tweet from Portland police as we continue to see what looks like officers kind of moving out a little bit. All right, I think let's bring in KGW's Morgan Romero, who's also downtown for us tonight. Morgan, you're at a bit of a different viewpoint than Art Edwards, and we're looking at Sky 8 right now, and it looks like a possible arrest underway. Right. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I'm on the opposite side of Chapman Square's Art. I'm on Southwest 4th Avenue in Madison. This is where police have told the people to leave and move south in this direction during this unlawful assembly, but we can hear the same flashbangs that Art is hearing. We've seen the same smoke being used. We don't feel any tear gas in our direction, so I can't say specifically if that's occurred yet tonight, but multiple flashbangs, and the crowd is starting to move out in this direction, heading up Madison.
Morgan, just to interrupt you, we are looking at Sky 8, and we did see an officer pepper spray a protester, and it looks like there's some sort of scuffle, maybe an arrest here with officers and other protesters. So we're really seeing things, intensify here in front of the Justice Center. Brittany.
Yeah, we'll continue to follow this for you throughout the evening and cut in if warranted. We'll be following this on our social media platforms, as this is the 9th night of protests. And as we see this kind of civil unrest that's happening, and now what's been declared a civil disturbance, we want to remind people about the protests that we saw earlier today, about the conversations that are continuing in our communities about race, racial injustice, police brutality, and to remember George Floyd and why these protests are happening. Like we see this happening night after night, a bit of a disturbance. This is when things start to change out there, but it is important to remember the peacefulness and the message that's behind this as we see destruction change as the night goes on.
Right. I'm so glad you said that, Brittany, because for so long, for hours, the protests are peaceful. And then around 11:30, just after 11:30, it seems like that's when the violence happens. So, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We will definitely continue to keep you updated as things progress, if they progress.
And remember, we will be streaming live with our Sky 8 cameras to show you the continued unrest in downtown Portland. Stick with us on our social media sites.
civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area now or you'll be subject to use of force and arrest. You need to leave the area from Southwest Lincoln to Burnside, Waterfront to 13th.
slide here.
To Lincoln. Those are our areas. Got it clear? Yes. Okay. As soon as they're done with the fence, we're going to load up and go forward.
You're driving, you're junior. First you're driving.
Okay. Hey, this is what I want.
Yep. Good.
tell you to move. You understand?
I'm not moving.
You cuff him.
Hope you feel good about yourself.
Hold his hands real quick. Okay.
Don't move your hands.
Are they still fighting? Can you hold him? Who do you need? This guy?
Handcuff. Hey.
I got it. Give me 2 seconds.
One of you guys watching behind us.
Hold on, I know. There's people behind us. Are you good?
Oh, I'm gonna need to cuff him in a second.
Okay, I have cuffs.
No, listen. Come down, I want to cut his front.
Put both your hands behind your back, man.
Very clear. No, you fucking both fought me already. I did not. I was laid down. The other guy was on me.
Sorry, they're tight.
Yep.
I know, relax.
Your back hurts? The backpack. Oh, the backpack?
I'll cut it.
There you go, man. Two in a row, people trying to fucking fight me.
You gotta get them.
Cut him.
Yeah. What? Hold on,
Anybody need medical?
I think so. Hold on. How much? Yeah. You're not going this way.
Can I go this way?
Nope.
Hey! I'm your wrist.
Back up. Stay back. Stay back.
I'll buy him a drink. I'll buy him a drink.
Get out of here. Go.
I'm only here because there's no trains running. I was forced out here on my way home.
You guys need to go home.
Which way can you go?
You need to go.
Which way?
Doesn't matter. Away. That way. That way or that way. Both of those ways are fine. We're going. We're done here. Go.
Guys got him?
You understand? Go home.
I get it, but like,
Grab his bike and go.
that's what they're afraid of. Let it go. I'm letting it go.
Okay.